and then we do move on to the business plan. Bill, it's back to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to introduce the business plan with a short film we've put together. It tries to capture a flavour of what matters to the patients we serve, and it's also got some contributions from people around this table. So if we can get that running.
I'd like the patients to have a voice, and I'd also like them to have a fairness, to be included.
Not just a number, and that they explain things to you.
Because you need someone that's interested as well to know what you're going through and give you advice as well.
There's nothing specific that I was expecting them to do, just to get on with the work, and hopefully everything works out okay.
To make sure that people are at the heart of the health and care service in England, we've devoted our first business plan to just that purpose. Our business plan says that we will prioritise patients in every decision we make. Our objective is solely to improve the outcomes for patients and our staff and their experience of health and care in England.
NHS England proposes to have a major focus on quality. And by quality, I mean improving the effectiveness of the care that we offer, ensuring that it's delivered safely, and ensuring that it's delivered in a way that's convenient and decent for patients. We're going to have a major focus on the things that kill the majority of our population: cardiovascular disease, cancer, lung disease and liver disease. We're also going to focus on better provision of care for long-term conditions in such a way that we can encourage patients to take greater control over the diseases that they need help with.
I'm here for treatment of prostate cancer. I've got to go through 37 treatments, which it's not daunting, but it's worrying sometimes. I think they do a really good job at the moment, and I'm expecting them to continue, keep up the good work.
We want good staff, looking after people, and good training. It's nice to see people actually on the wards as well, talking to people, because sometimes you just don't see them about.
NHS England puts patients first. It is absolutely our priority, and it runs through everything we do. We want care to be provided that is compassionate, that is based on high quality outcomes and a fantastic patient experience. We are truly focused on making sure that happens to all of the patients that we serve. Our business plan commits to that in terms of measuring care in that way, and I introduced last December the nursing strategy, Compassion in Practice. That sets out what we will do to improve care to patients.
This is Kieran, our youngest son, and that's my husband Joe. I think when you come, you don't want passing from pillar to post, this department here, that department.
Our job is to make sure we deliver the best possible health care for the money the taxpayer gives us. But it's also to make sure that we build the NHS which will be sustainable for the long term as we all age as a population. Both of those things get you to the same place. We need people more engaged in their health care, and that means we have to have people who are more engaged in the design of that health care so it genuinely meets the needs of the public.
We've got to create a visceral sense of improvement and change, and we've got to create a visceral sense that the NHS and social care system, that health belongs to the people. You have to start where people are at, no matter how hard that is. You have to value their language. You have to help them understand that they have power in the system. A lot of people don't feel they have any power, and they disengage, and that leads to misunderstanding about how the system actually works. Our legacy should be that health belongs to the people.
More communication, and I'm going to say resources, but there is a lack of resources, isn't there, and there's only so much that they can actually do. But as long as it's fairness and patients are involved in their own treatment, that we don't make decisions without including those.
I like people to explain things. I think even now a lot of doctors don't. They say these big words, and a nicer bedside manner You're very vulnerable when you come in hospital, and I think sometimes it's they take it because they're dealing with it day in, day out. It might be your first experience. I just think that
I think the service is
I think it'd be a shame if we lost it.
To prioritise patients and citizens in the design and delivery of the health and care service in this country means we have to listen. We have to learn how to listen. The patient revolution, the people revolution that we are going to lead from now on is also an information revolution. And in the business plan, we really do make very radical new commitments to transparency of information to support our ability to properly listen to people as they go through the health and care service.
Great NHS would look like at the customer at the centre of the NHS. I think what's hugely encouraging is if everybody thought about customer rather than systems and processes.
We have to create a sense in which people have ownership of the process so they understand why change happens and they're bought into designing and delivering services. And we have to create equality of access, treatment and outcome.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought colleagues around the table were fantastic, but for me, the baby was actually the star performer. Our business plan is a response to that, to what the communities we serve, the patients we serve, demand of us, often at their most vulnerable and worried time. And the plan we've got before us today, I think, is an ambitious one. It responds both to the voice and aspiration of patients and communities, but also is very important in the context of the Robert Francis report that we discussed at the last board meeting, and the expectations about cultural change and how we work into the future. I want to draw out three areas of, I think, quite significant ambition for us. The first is around delivery. So this is a plan which in its 11-point scoreboard right at the front sets out very openly how our success will be judged, and also has the detail in the annex of how we're going to deliver the government's mandate, and indeed our part in pushing through the changes and improvements which everyone counts that we discussed in the autumn set out. So ambitious for delivery and improvement. I think it's also very ambitious about fairness. We've been very consistent, I think, right from the start around this table that it's not good enough just to have overall improvement. We need to be satisfied that those groups who perhaps are marginalised, who've been disadvantaged, that they are also getting the benefit of change and the benefit of better health, better outcomes, and a significant voice in the way we want to shape and deliver services. We're making a commitment in here to measure everything we can, not just by its aggregate improvement, by what difference it's making to different groups in our communities. And I would just point out in paragraphs 102 to 105 in the third section, an important piece which is our interim equality objectives that as part of the business plan we'd like the board to endorse today. The third point of ambition I think I want to set out is around our values and our approach. And this comes straight back to what David was saying in the previous item. This is signposting, if like, a different way to deliver change, improvement, and a new focus on priorities. And right at the top of our scorecard, we're setting out the two measures that we think are paramount above all else, and that's satisfied patients, patients who are experiencing the right sort of care, the right sort of service, and satisfied, empowered and motivated staff, because there's very strong evidence now that those are umbilically linked. If we want to improve outcomes, if we want to follow through on the commitments for change, then we need to support our staff and give them the right motivation, the right leadership, and the right commitment and determination to do the right thing. So we will be testing ourselves against how satisfied our staff and our patients are consistently. We're also in here talking about a service which is driven by patient and community voice. Again, this picks up a lot on the last item. There have been charges, perhaps even in the Robert Francis report, that too often the service has been straining its neck upwards to understand what politicians are looking for next. This now is the opportunity to face outwards and work with patients and communities all the time, understanding what will make the greatest difference to them and using that connection, that understanding to drive our priorities and what we believe is most important. There's a lot in here about clinical leadership. At the heart of some of these changes is that belief that clinicians, and particularly our local clinical leaders in clinical commissioning groups, can be closest to patients, can make the changes that matter most to local communities. And there's a whole piece in here about we as the NHS England standing alongside our local clinical commissioning groups together to bring about the change that their communities are looking for. Great deal about transparency, our commitment to openness, which you, Chair, championed from the very start of the Commissioning Board Authority as it was then. You know, from those small beginnings, this is now setting out some serious ambitions, perhaps exemplified by Bruce's work in publishing outcomes across those 10 surgical specialties. And last but not least, I'd point to a new culture of partnership that runs through this business plan. We've already developed very good relations with the new parts of the system that you talked about in the introduction. Also, I'd flag up what I think is really a burgeoning partnership with local government. You and I met with the Chair and Chief Executive of the Local Government Association a few weeks ago, and I think we agreed there that we're probably in a better place in terms of positive relationships, make improvements around integrated care for local communities than NHS and local government has ever experienced before. And we need to build on that and really bring to life the health and wellbeing partnership as a way to get great value out of limited public resource, but to do that in a way which responds to patients and communities locally. So an ambitious plan, hopefully one that really will make a difference for patients, communities we serve, and I'd ask the board to note this plan.
Thank you very much, Bill. Let's take some comments from colleagues on the board. Nagi?
I think this is excellent. I fully endorse the direction and the principles. I think I had two observations when I reread this. Well, three observations, I'd say, actually. One is that it does come across, again, like a sort of NHS policy document, 60 pages long. By the time you finish reading it, you sort of ask yourself, what was actually what's the big message in it? There is a big message in it, and it's right there up at the front. But I think it's very important that it doesn't become a 60-page document that is filed somewhere and never referred to again as being a nice policy document, business plan. And the two things that I think, tangibly we need to focus on is, if you look at all these objectives, there are almost none of them that are going to be addressed in one shot. They're evolution over a period of time objectives. And these are all things, without wanting to get into a world that's kind of focused on targets again and numerical targets. If you're trying to measure progress on them, you need to have some sense of, you know, that's a benchmark to shoot for, and then when we get to that one, we're going to try and improve it to the next stage. So what are the steps along the way that say, well, that's good and that's better and that's really where we're trying to head? So the two things for me from that list of different objectives was about how do you create some time-bound staging posts to say 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 24 months from now, where do we want to be on this journey? And two is how do you get to some measures that allow you to say, are you succeeding or not? Because a lot of the comments are not precise in definition, so you can agree with the concept, but you wouldn't know, are you succeeding or not succeeding on it? And I think the only way to do that is to reduce it down to fewer things that we look at regularly in evolution with data to say, are we travelling in the right direction over certain periods of time? Otherwise, what ends up happening is it's a 60-page nice document that expresses good intent, but how you translate it into some useful tool, I'm not sure.
Shall I take one or two other points, Bill, and you might want to come back to address them? I had both Joe and Ed.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw our collective attention to the bit of the business plan that talks about us as an organisation and our aspirations to be excellent. And just to focus on how important the development of our own organisation is and the experience of our own staff in this. I think often it's been my experience of working in the NHS in the past that strategic organisations with significant system-wide responsibilities tend to look out a lot, out to the system, and can sometimes fall into the trap of mostly looking outwards and not looking inwards. And I think us being NHS England as an employing body with 6,500 staff being an excellent organisation is the foundation for the achievement of all the other stuff, I think. And I very much support what Margaret said earlier, but add to it that I think our staff experience is just as important as experience of staff on the front line.
Yeah, thanks. Ed?
I think it's excellent. I commend it. I think it particularly provides a bridge between the mandate and what we have to do. And Nagib's point, I think, is very well taken, because I think this has to be a living document in a number of ways. And I think with my audit committee hat on, one of those is translating from the business plan, and I've already had this conversation with Bill and Paul, into what are the risks associated with the execution of this plan, and what are the mechanisms for keeping the board apprised of the assurance on those risks, the management of those risks, as we go through the course of the next year or two. So I think its utility is very much in what we then do with it, and I would like to see a very clear link between the delivery of the business plan, the risks associated with it, and the mitigations which management have in train to make sure that we execute.
Victor and Kieran.
Well, I think it's great. I've said so on film now, so it's a bit late. But I think this is a really good plan, and I guess the thing for me, agreeing with Nagib and Ed absolutely, is we need to be really honest about the challenge that is represented in this plan. I mean, this is a huge challenge, and I think one of my things is really about explaining to people what this means, the implications of delivering 10, becoming an excellent organisation in relation to the equality issues that we've talked about, the leadership challenges, the ideas of engaging communities at a time that people will campaign not to change anything is a big challenge, and I just think that we need to be there's almost a bit about this document to make it live, which is explaining or engaging with people in discussion about what does this mean then. The implications of this means that actually things are not going to stay the same. You will have to do things differently, and what does that mean? And I think that's what creates the wow, this isn't just a 60-page document, this means I'm doing something different on Monday I wasn't doing on Friday, and getting people to explain that to themselves and to us would be really powerful. But I think this is great. It's a step forward.
Thank you, Kieran.
It's really built on Nagy, but I think part of what we need to debate as we go forward is what are we actually going to do to improve things under domain 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, and make sure we're clear about what those few priorities which we will focus on in the intermediate term are, because the mandate itself, but also this is an excuse to do everything. So it's really around saying what will we land in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time, in 18 months' time, and be clear on that and saying, well, we can't do everything immediately, and then have the reporting mechanism back on those as well, so that it's not just the numbers overall and our progress that comes back, but it's that we're confident we have the actions in place to drive progress over time.
Okay, thanks. Bill, you may wish to respond. Some of those are for absorption rather than for response, but please do respond as appropriate.
I completely agree with them. I think there is a risk on, the 60-pager, which in a sense is why we did that little kind of 2-side plan on a page up front. And if, anyone wants to, what's the potted version of what we're about, it's there on 2 sides. The important and accompanying piece is exactly the one that Ed talked about in his contribution, which is making sure that the board assurance and reporting framework is now wrapped around this and is created in a way which brings to the board both those strategically important measures, but also those which appear to be the riskiest and therefore that we should put most attention to. So that's the piece of work along with the audit committee that we're carrying out now. I'd also say that David took his senior team away just before Easter to be thinking, what should we be spending our time on? And the way he ran that was to look at the business plan, start understanding where the risks are, where the immediacy is, so that your senior executive team is already beginning to work through a risk-based approach to what we need to do to help deliver and support all of our people to deliver the business plans. So the points are exactly well made, and we'll be picking those up.
Well, thank you, Bill. Can I, on behalf of the board, commend you and your team for the work that's gone into producing such an excellent business plan, because it has within it, I think, both a spelling out of the enormity of the challenges that we face, but also, I think, a sense of can-do and a sense of where we go to in order to be able to deliver on the 5 domains for which we're accountable. We look forward to further iterations. Now, I'm very sympathetic to the idea that 65 pages is a long read, but actually also quite sympathetic to the idea that to compress it into anything smaller would be quite a challenge, because there is so much to do. But Naguib's point is very well made, which is we need to understand what are the key priorities, how we measure the phases of delivery, and how we measure success within each phase as we go along. So subject to that discipline, may I ask the board to approve the business plan, but with particular reference also to the equality objectives, the interim equality objectives that are set out, particularly in paragraph 3.104, which we've not touched on, although Bill did mention in his outline and Victor touched upon in his comments. But are we happy to approve it with those in particular? Thank you very much.